Why would a head coach walk into one of the NFL's youngest, most explosive rosters and immediately start questioning the quarterback? Behind closed doors in Atlanta, tension is building. Rumors are swirling. And what's happening between Kevin Stefanski and this franchise could quietly reshape everything before the season even begins. Before Atlanta ever entered the picture, the real questions began in Cleveland. When Kevin Stefanski arrived to lead the Cleveland Browns, there was optimism. He was viewed as steady, structured, quarterback-friendly. In his first season, the Browns won a playoff game and it looked like stability had finally arrived, but what followed over the next several years told a far more complicated story. 13 different starting quarterbacks took snaps during Stefanski's tenure. 13, that alone raised eyebrows across the league. There was Baker Mayfield, once considered the franchise cornerstone, early flashes, big personality, playoff momentum, but the relationship cooled quickly. Injuries, inconsistency, public tension. Eventually, he was gone. Then came Jacoby Brissett, steady but temporary, a bridge solution, a stabilizer, not a future. The blockbuster move followed. Deshaun Watson, massive contract, franchise-altering commitment, yet performance never quite aligned with expectations. Rust, injuries, system-fit debates. Fans began asking whether the offense was elevating the quarterback or restricting him. Late in the cycle, even Joe Flacco stepped in during emergency stretches, short bursts of success, veteran composure, but again, temporary. The carousel kept spinning. Now, context matters. Injuries were Stefanski's fault. Front office decisions weren't always his alone. But perception in the NFL doesn't separate nuance from pattern, and the pattern many observers saw was instability at the most important position in sports. Critics began questioning whether Stefanski was truly a quarterback developer or simply a system coach whose offense required perfect conditions to thrive. Some analysts argued that young quarterbacks under his watch never fully gained rhythm before the reset button was hit. Others pushed back, saying circumstances, not coaching philosophy, caused the turbulence. Inside Cleveland, reports suggested there were moments of tension about direction, nothing officially explosive, nothing confirmed as toxic, but the constant change at quarterback created uncertainty, and uncertainty makes development harder. By the end of his Browns run, one question lingered louder than the others. Did any quarterback truly grow long-term under Kevin Stefanski? That question didn't disappear when he left Ohio. It followed him. And now, as conversations begin swirling in Atlanta, fans aren't just evaluating a new situation. They're revisiting an old one. Because when a coach has overseen that much turnover at quarterback, fair or unfair, people start to wonder whether it's coincidence or philosophy. And that's where the concern quietly begins. Before any rumors, before any tension, before outside voices got loud, there was a plan in Atlanta. When Arthur Blank and the Atlanta Falcons front office began reshaping this roster, the blueprint was clear: build young, build explosive, and build for sustainability. This wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a desperate veteran grab. It was a long-term vision centered on development. The draft investments told the story. Michael Penix Jr. wasn't selected to sit in limbo. He was brought in as a foundational piece, a left-handed playmaker with arm talent, poise, and the kind of deep ball confidence that energizes a fan base. The organization knew there would be growing pains. That was part of the timeline. The belief was simple: give him weapons, give him time, and let the offense mature together. And the weapons were already in place. Drake London emerged as a physical, high-point target capable of dominating contested catches. Kyle Pitts remained one of the most unique matchup problems at tight end when healthy and utilized properly. Bijan Robinson brought explosive versatility, a back who can shift games both on the ground and through the air. This wasn't a roster lacking identity. It was young, fast, flexible, and built to grow together. Ownership's expectation wasn't to tear this down, it was to elevate it. The head coaching hire was meant to maximize what was already brewing, not to reset the most important position before it even stabilized. The idea was alignment, coaching philosophy matching the timeline of a developing core. There's also the competitive context. The NFC South hasn't been a division dominated by a single powerhouse in recent seasons. The opportunity window felt real. With the right progression at quarterback, Atlanta believed it could compete while still developing. That balance is difficult in the NFL but not impossible. And that's why the early whispers have raised eyebrows. Because when a franchise invests this heavily in youth, financially, emotionally, strategically, patience isn't weakness. It's part of the design. Disrupting that process too quickly can fracture confidence, not just in the quarterback but in the overall direction. Arthur Blank didn't greenlight this rebuild to pivot at the first sign of turbulence. The roster wasn't assembled for short-term panic, it was built with intention. Which makes the current conversations feel unexpected. Because if the original vision was development and continuity, any deviation from that philosophy isn't minor. It's foundational. And that's where the tension truly starts. Then came the whispers. Not a press conference, not a public statement, just quiet reports that began circulating around league circles. Some insiders claim that Kevin Stefanski has expressed interest in bringing another quarterback into the building, not necessarily to replace Michael Penix Jr. outright, but to create what's being described as real competition. That wording matters. Because competition in the NFL can mean two very different things. It can mean healthy depth, insurance, a veteran presence to help a young starter prepare, or it can mean doubt, a shortened leash, a signal that belief isn't fully locked in. To be clear, there has been no official confirmation that the Atlanta Falcons are actively replacing Penix. No transaction has occurred. No public ultimatum has been issued. What's circulating falls into the category of reports and speculation spreads fast when quarterback development is involved. But here, why it's catching fire. Penix hasn't had a full runway yet. Young quarterbacks typically need time to adjust to NFL speed, defensive disguises, and the weekly preparation grind. If rumors suggest the organization is already exploring alternatives, some fans interpret that as hesitation. And hesitation at quarterback can shift locker room psychology quickly. Supporters of Stefanski argue that bringing in another quarterback is simply smart roster management. The NFL is brutal. Injuries happen, depth matters. A veteran backup can stabilize a season if things go sideways. From that perspective, it's not about replacing Penix, it's about protecting the franchise. Critics see it differently. They point to how early competition can subtly undermine confidence. If a rookie or second-year quarterback constantly feels evaluated against a potential replacement, development can tighten instead of expand, risk-taking decreases, creativity shrinks, and sometimes growth stalls under pressure. There's also the optics. When a young quarterback is drafted high, ownership typically wants to signal clear belief, public backing, organizational alignment. If rumors of quarterback shopping emerge too soon, fans begin wondering whether there's disagreement behind closed doors. Again, none of this confirms a fracture, but perception shapes narrative, and narrative influences momentum. Some reports suggest internal meetings have included discussions about adding experience to the room. Others claim it's standard off-season evaluation chatter being blown out of proportion. Without verified statements, the truth likely sits somewhere in between. Still, the timing is what raises eyebrows. Because when speculation about replacing a young quarterback surfaces before he's fully established, it doesn't just spark debate. It changes the temperature of the entire building. And that's when the conversation quietly shifts from development to doubt. When Cam Newton spoke up, the conversation shifted from quiet speculation to national debate. He didn't wait for the season to unfold. The moment Kevin Stefanski was connected to Atlanta, Cam publicly questioned the move, and he wasn't subtle about it. He pointed directly at Stefanski's history with young quarterbacks, specifically referencing what happened with Shedeur Sanders during his time in Cleveland. Cam's argument wasn't about play design or win-loss records, it was about opportunity. He suggested that Sanders never truly received a full runway to grow within the system. According to Cam, the leash felt short, the support felt inconsistent, and when adversity hit, the narrative quickly turned toward the quarterback instead of the structure around him. Now, to be clear, not everyone agrees with that interpretation. Some analysts argue Sanders' situation in Cleveland involved broader roster instability, injuries, and front office decisions beyond the head coach's control. Others believe Stefanski operated within difficult circumstances that would have challenged any coach. But Cam wasn't speaking in maybe, he spoke with conviction. He warned that Atlanta needed to be careful. He pointed out that the Atlanta Falcons are built around youth, especially at quarterback. And he questioned whether Stefanski's track record truly reflected a coach who nurtures young passers through early turbulence. Social media exploded. Some fans applauded Cam for saying what they felt but couldn't articulate. They viewed his comments as protective, standing up for young quarterbacks who may not always get patience from leadership. Others accused him of pushing a narrative too aggressively, suggesting he was connecting dots that might not be fully related. That split reaction only fueled the story further. Because whether you agree with Cam or not, his words introduced a theme that's hard to ignore: development versus doubt. Cam also raised a broader question: how quickly do organizations pivot when young quarterbacks struggle, and who gets the benefit of time? That debate extends beyond Atlanta. It's a league-wide tension point. Some quarterbacks are given multiple seasons to find rhythm. Others feel like they're auditioning every Sunday. Again, it's important to frame this carefully. There is no confirmed evidence of personal conflict between Stefanski and Sanders. There is no verified internal documentation suggesting bias or intentional sabotage. What exists are interpretations and strong opinions from high-profile voices. But perception matters in professional sports. When a former MVP publicly questions a coaching hire, it sticks. It lingers. And if rumors of quarterback competition begin surfacing at the same time, fans start connecting narratives. That doesn't make those narratives fact. It makes them powerful. And once that narrative gains traction, every roster decision starts being viewed through that lens, fair or not. That's when a football discussion quietly becomes something bigger. And that's exactly where Atlanta now finds itself. At the center of all this noise sits one uncomfortable question: does Kevin Stefanski actually develop quarterbacks, or does he manage them? That's not an accusation, it's a debate. When Stefanski first took over the Cleveland Browns, his offense was praised for structure: heavy play action, strong run game foundation, defined reads. In 2020, it worked beautifully with Baker Mayfield: efficient numbers, smart decisions, a playoff win. For a moment, it looked like the perfect marriage between system and quarterback. But the seasons that followed complicated that picture. Mayfield regressed while battling injuries, the offense tightened, explosive plays dipped. Some analysts argued the scheme became predictable. Others countered that execution, not design, was the real issue. Eventually, the partnership ended. Then came Deshaun Watson, a massive investment, franchise-altering contract, yet the offense never fully unlocked his Houston-era dynamism. Injuries played a role, so did rust, but critics pointed out that the system didn't appear tailored to Watson's strengths. The question lingered: was the quarterback adapting to the scheme, or was the scheme adapting to the quarterback? That distinction matters in development. Even short-term stretches with Joe Flacco sparked debate. When Flacco stepped in and pushed the ball aggressively downfield, the offense suddenly looked looser, more vertical. Some fans wondered why that version hadn't consistently appeared earlier. Others argued veteran experience simply changes execution speed. None of this proves failure, but it fuels perception. Supporters of Stefanski say he's structured, disciplined, and protects quarterbacks with a strong run game identity. They argue that chaos around Cleveland, injuries, roster turnover, front office decisions distorted the evaluation. Development, they insist, requires stability, and Stefanski rarely had it. Critics see something else. They argue that elite quarterback developers build around their passers' strengths quickly. They point to coaches who reshape their offense midseason when necessary. They question whether Stefanski's scheme is flexible enough to evolve alongside a young quarterback's growth curve. That's the heart of the debate in Atlanta. Because Michael Penix Jr. isn't a finished product, he's a projection, a talented arm with timing-based strengths and deep ball confidence. If the system leans conservative early, does it limit expansion, or does it protect him while he adjusts to NFL complexity? There's also a philosophical divide in today's league. Some coaches believe in minimizing mistakes first, then unlocking creativity later. Others believe aggressive growth, even through turnovers, accelerates development. Neither approach is universally right, but alignment between coach and quarterback style is critical. Reports suggest, and again this remains speculative, that internal discussions in Atlanta revolve around timeline expectations. How quickly should Penix look comfortable? How much volatility is acceptable? What's the balance between protecting him and challenging him? And that's where tension can quietly build. Because if ownership believes in patience while a coaching staff believes in immediate efficiency, subtle friction forms, not explosive, not public, just philosophical. Development isn't about one game. It's about trajectory. And whether Stefanski's track record represents growth or management depends entirely on which side of the debate you're standing on. That uncertainty is exactly why this conversation refuses to go away. Beyond the noise, beyond the debates about philosophy, there's a colder reality shaping everything in Atlanta: contracts and timing. In today's NFL, the rookie quarterback contract is one of the most valuable assets in the sport. When a team drafts a passer like Michael Penix Jr., they're not just drafting talent, they're drafting financial flexibility. For 4 to 5 years, that deal allows the front office to stack the roster elsewhere. Defensive stars get extended, offensive weapons get paid, depth gets reinforced. But that window doesn't stay open forever. The Atlanta Falcons are quietly entering a phase where that flexibility matters more than ever. Young stars won't stay cheap indefinitely. Extensions creep up fast. Once second contracts hit the books, roster building becomes tighter. That means the quarterback evaluation clock ticks faster than fans realize. Ownership understands that. Arthur Blank didn't invest in this roster just to hover around mediocrity. He's watched the franchise cycle through rebuilds before. He's seen promise fade due to instability. This current core, Penix, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, represents another carefully constructed window, and windows in the NFL are fragile. That's where pressure begins to mount. If the coaching staff believes Penix needs extended developmental time, that's one path. If they believe the roster is ready to compete immediately, that's another. And if there's even slight misalignment between ownership urgency and coaching patience, tension can quietly grow. There's also the fifth-year option factor. First-round quarterbacks trigger long-term financial decisions earlier than many fans expect. By year 3, front offices are already projecting extension scenarios. By year 4, they're making commitments that define the next half-decade. So every season before that becomes data collection. Is he trending upward? Is he commanding the offense? Is he limiting costly mistakes? Is he elevating late-game situations? Those aren't emotional questions, they're financial ones. And then there's the division context. The NFC South hasn't been dominated by a perennial powerhouse recently. That creates opportunity, but it also increases expectation. When a division looks winnable, patience shortens naturally. A team may feel it's just a quarterback leap away from playoff relevance. That belief can accelerate internal timelines. From the coaching side, there's pressure too. If Kevin Stefanski believes his job security is tied to immediate competitiveness, he may lean towards stability over experimentation. That could mean simplifying the offense. It could mean protecting leads conservatively. It could even mean advocating for veteran insurance at quarterback, not as a rejection of Penix, but as protection against volatility. From ownership side, the equation might look different. If the long-term plan revolves around Penix becoming the face of the franchise, then early wavering sends the wrong signal. Confidence from the top matters, public backing matters, organizational unity matters. Because once internal disagreement becomes visible, it doesn't stay contained. Players notice tone shifts, agents notice messaging, media amplifies subtle language, fans react to perceived doubt, and suddenly what started as routine off-season evaluation becomes a storyline about alignment. None of this guarantees fracture. But in the NFL, contracts create urgency, timelines create pressure, and pressure tests relationships faster than most fans realize. The Falcons aren't just managing a quarterback. They're managing a competitive window. And that makes every decision, even rumored ones, heavier than they appear. So where does this actually go from here? Because once speculation reaches this level, the next move matters more than the rumor itself. Option 1 is the cleanest: public commitment. Kevin Stefanski steps to the podium and makes it crystal clear that Michael Penix Jr. is the unquestioned starter. No vague language, no "we'll evaluate everything," just direct backing. That kind of statement can calm a building instantly. It signals alignment, it reassures the locker room, it tells fans the plan hasn't changed. But words only go so far. If Atlanta backs Penix publicly yet quietly adds a high-profile veteran, the message becomes mixed. Even if framed as depth, the optics would spark another wave of debate. Is this insurance, or is it doubt disguised as competition? In today's NFL, perception spreads faster than clarification. Option 2 is subtle reinforcement. The Atlanta Falcons could add a low-profile veteran backup, someone clearly slotted as support, not threat. A quarterback with experience but not one who immediately ignites controversy. That would allow Stefanski to claim preparedness without shaking the foundation. It's a middle path, controlled, measured. But even that approach depends on tone. If coaches consistently emphasize earning the job every week, fans may read between the lines. Young quarterbacks develop best when the runway feels stable. Constant evaluation, at least publicly, can tighten a player's internal clock. Then there's the scenario no one wants to imagine: philosophical fracture. If ownership, led by Arthur Blank, strongly believes Penix is the long-term vision while the coaching staff leans toward quicker competitive certainty, friction becomes inevitable. Not explosive, not dramatic at first, just subtle disagreement over risk tolerance. Does the offense open up early in the season, or stay conservative? Do they live with aggressive mistakes, or rein them in immediately? Do they build around Penix's strengths, even if raw, or force him into strict structure? Those choices will reveal alignment faster than any press conference. There's also the media layer. If early season struggles happen, and most young quarterbacks struggle at some point, outside noise will intensify. Analysts will revisit Stefanski's Cleveland history, they'll reference quarterback turnover, they'll question development patterns. Social media will amplify every sideline interaction. That environment tests organizational unity. If the Falcons start strong, this entire storyline fades overnight. Winning silences speculation. But if inconsistency appears, every rumor suddenly feels prophetic. That's the danger of narratives forming before kickoff. And then there's the locker room factor. Veterans watch how leadership handles pressure. If Penix feels supported, that confidence radiates. If uncertainty creeps in, teammates sense it. Quarterback leadership isn't just about arm talent, it's about organizational belief. Players respond differently when they know the franchise is fully behind their guy. Some fans believe Stefanski simply wants leverage competition to sharpen focus. Others believe rumors suggest deeper doubt. The truth likely lives somewhere in between. Coaches are wired to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Owners are wired to protect long-term investments. Those priorities don't always clash, but they don't always perfectly align either. And here's the part nobody says out loud. If Atlanta commits fully to Penix and he flourishes, Stefanski looks patient and strategic. If they hesitate and Penix blossoms elsewhere one day, the regret would linger for years. Quarterback decisions define eras, they shape legacies, they determine who gets extended and who gets replaced. So what happens next isn't just about depth charts. It's about identity. Will the Falcons double down on their youth movement, or subtly pivot toward caution before the season even finds rhythm? Because once a franchise shows uncertainty at quarterback, revering that signal isn't easy. The next move, public or private, will tell us everything about where Atlanta truly stands. At this point, it's tempting to frame this entire situation around one name: Michael Penix Jr. But that would be missing the bigger picture. Because what's unfolding in Atlanta isn't just about whether Penix succeeds or struggles, it's about philosophy, it's about alignment, and it's about who ultimately controls the direction of the Atlanta Falcons moving forward. Quarterbacks are never just players, they're timelines. When a franchise drafts a young passer, it's making a multi-year declaration. It's saying, this is the direction, this is the investment, this is the future. Everything else, contracts, schemes, personnel moves, orbits that decision. If that foundation shifts too early, it doesn't just impact the depth chart, it shakes organizational identity. That's why the reported tension surrounding Kevin Stefanski feels heavier than a routine offseason storyline. If Stefanski truly believes competition is necessary, that reflects one worldview: urgency, insurance, preparation for volatility. If ownership led by Arthur Blank believes patience is essential, that reflects another: stability, long-term trust, developmental confidence. Neither philosophy is inherently wrong, but misalignment between them can quietly fracture momentum. And this is where Cam Newton's earlier warning re-enters the conversation. When Cam Newton publicly questioned Stefanski's track record with young quarterbacks, many dismissed it as commentary noise. But now, with rumors swirling, some fans are revisiting those words, not as proof, not as confirmation, but as a lens. Some supporters believe Cam was highlighting a pattern of short leashes and quick pivots. Others argue he oversimplified complex situations from Stefanski's time in Cleveland. The truth likely lives somewhere in between perception and circumstance. What matters now is this: how does Atlanta respond under pressure? If Penix struggles early, does the organization double down on development, or does it pivot toward immediate steadiness? If he flashes brilliance and inconsistency in equal measure, which most young quarterbacks do, will that be viewed as progress or instability? Because that choice defines trajectory. This franchise has built a roster around youth: Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a core designed to grow together. Quarterback is the centerpiece of that architecture. If belief wavers too soon, the ripple effects extend beyond one position. Fans feel it, players sense it, agents notice it, media amplifies it. And once the perception of doubt takes hold, it's difficult to reverse. There's also legacy at stake. For Stefanski, this is more than a fresh start. It's an opportunity to reshape how the league views him. A chance to prove he can cultivate a young quarterback long-term, not just manage seasons amid chaos. Success in Atlanta wouldn't just stabilize the Falcons, it would redefine his narrative. For Arthur Blank, it's about stewardship. He's seen eras rise and fall. He understands how fragile windows can be. If he believes Penix is the future, protecting that vision becomes a leadership test. And for Penix himself, this is the crucible moment, not because he's failed, not because he's proven anything yet, but because young quarterbacks often develop in environments shaped by belief or doubt. The difference between those two atmospheres can be subtle but powerful. That's why this story feels larger than depth charts and practice reps. It's about trust. Trust between coach and quarterback, trust between ownership and coaching staff, trust between franchise and fan base. If Atlanta shows unified confidence, the noise fades. If mixed signals continue, the narrative grows louder. And in the NFL, narratives have weight. They influence patience, they influence perception, they influence how long a leash truly is, even if no one says it out loud. So no, this isn't just about one quarterback competition rumor. It's about whether the Falcons stay committed to the vision they drafted or quietly shift course before that vision has time to breathe. Because in this league, the hardest thing to build isn't talent. It's alignment. And the teams that protect alignment, especially at quarterback, are usually the ones still standing when the noise finally clears.